Davis. I'm here with Doc Hannah, who's going to talk us through and assist us in exploring isometrics.
Yeah.
But isometrics with a bit of difference, because Hannah, who trains with me and does a lot of PT work and jiu-jitsu, has recently had a baby, haven't you?
Yes.
And the baby is outside with husband, who's now just walking around, keeping baby nice and quiet so we can do this interview without too much interference. Just tell us about your background, Hannah, if you would.
Yes, of course. So I'm a doctor. I work in the NHS. I'm specialising in geriatric medicine, but work in general adult medicine. Became a personal trainer as well about 3 years ago now. Partly out of interest, so having done a lot of running predominantly, but sort of a lot of physical exercise myself, and seen the benefits of that for sort of health and well-being. But I got increasingly frustrated with seeing, you know, diabetics or individuals of a young age in their sort of 50s coming in, risk of a heart attack, risk of a stroke, those kind of things that we know you can modify by lifestyle, and not being able to plug them into a service that exists everywhere and is standardised to allow them to do those things to adapt their lifestyle. So I thought, well, let's have a look at this, and this might be a really useful skill to have going forwards. But then actually picked up a few kind of clients on the way just to utilise that skill to get better at it. And then my husband and I started jiu-jitsu about 2 years ago, and that's how we met Paul. And at that point realised, well, actually is a form of exercise that's really complete. And thinking again about the population I serve in geriatric medicine, well, here's something that gives you everything. You're using the right side of your body, the left side of the body, so many different parts of your brain, as much as different parts of your body, in a really functional way to get really strong and to be very coordinated, and I think probably build up a lot of muscle and be very resilient to some of the adverse effects of ageing that we see. So it was a real light bulb moment for me, going, well, actually this really does seem like a very interesting, complete form of exercise. And then we got talking, and that's how we developed some of our ideas.
Well, and we must just say, we're not going to talk about it too much today, but something that's very relevant for rugby and jiu-jitsu is a thing called ACMMT, which is Advanced Activation Contact Muscle Memory Training. A long name, but it describes really the fact that neurons that fire together, join together. And if you want to develop skills in jiu-jitsu, or you want to develop skills and build up strength for ordinary daily things like getting out of a chair if you're a senior citizen, all these things involve some form of training and the right type of training. Today we're actually going to look at something which is often, I call it the forgotten cornerstone of strength and fitness, and that's isometrics, because we have concentric contractions of muscles where they're getting shorter, the classic build your bicep, make it big. We jump off things, and when we break our fall, we have the muscle getting longer, but it's exerting force to break the fall. But the thing that everyone forgets is, whilst all these things are going on, the dear old isometric contractions, that's where the muscle's under tension, but there's no movement about the joint, taking place all the time, because the core, which has become so popular, is effectively all about keeping the spine in line, structurally safe, and there's a huge amount of isometric operation taking place there. And more importantly as well, you know, when you do something in sport, and I know Hannah has talked about this in relation to older people and people who she cares for as well in her professional life as a doctor, when you do something over here, often you're pushing off your foot over here, and so the force has to travel through and across the body. And in the sport we do, which is jiu-jitsu, people often talk about being connected or invisible jiu-jitsu, but the ability to be connected to someone, to transmit force, always involves some form of isometric contraction.
I mean, the perfect example you give is getting up out of a chair, something that older people find so difficult. And so, you know, again, the idea of being able to exert that force, hold that and this in an isometric fashion. But imagine as well things like rolling over in bed. So again, that idea of being connected across your body, so easy to lose that. Again, in jiu-jitsu, in sport, you use an arm block sometimes to stop someone from moving. Imagine you've broken your arm because you've fallen, how much mobility you lose. Because, like you say, you don't appreciate how much these things are connected. until you lose it. So all of those things just demonstrate isometrics in action. Yeah.
The point you raise about arms, because interestingly enough, due to old war wounds, because I've competed a lot and played rugby, I had an arm operation quite recently, and it was amazing to find that because you can't use your arm, you've lost so much mobility in ways you wouldn't realise. Now, doing jiu-jitsu, we use our arm and elbow a lot, and so it was easier to adapt and to use ways of moving in bed or getting up. But it really underlines the point that Hannah's making. There's so much that people don't realise. And the old saying, use it or lose it, is so true. That this is why isometrics is something which we would advocate. We use it in our ACMMT. This is a form of warm-up that I originally worked on back in 2004 with Dr. Colin Cleland. I've worked on it with Hannah, and we've progressed it. It's ideal for going into contact for rugby and jiu-jitsu, and interestingly enough, Bristol University have done some research where they've proved that a correct warm-up can reduce injury and aid performance. Well, that's what I was pushing back in 2004, just stating my chronology there, but I presented this to the New Zealand High Performance Unit, part of it, because obviously one doesn't hand one's research out completely. But we use it a lot in jiu-jitsu, and we think it has a role to play in activating people who want to do exercise for daily quality of life, as well as rugby and jiu-jitsu. And I know there are classes now, aren't there, Hannah, where people do chair fit.
Yes.
But there's so much more that can be done as well, sitting in a chair using isometrics.
And I think the point is, again, if you can build it up when you're young and you're more able, so, any age, but 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and be using this all the time, and God forbid when you get older and you fall over or break something or become less strong, because we do lose muscle as we age, you are more resilient to what is natural aging. And then if you have an intercurrent illness in the meantime, you have that reserve to keep you weller. And so this is a simple way we see of being able to really build up strength over time to help you be more resilient, as much as to assist with any sporting endeavours that you have in the meantime, like you say, from running to contact sports like rugby and jiu-jitsu. So yeah, simple, easy, effective exercises that can be incorporated into things you do on a daily basis, or can be a quick 10-minute workout, but things that you really can progress well with if you use them well, and that's what we'd like to demonstrate.
Well, that point about 10-minute workouts, Hannah and I are going to be putting up a series of workouts that you can do. We'll literally just do workout of the day, but we're also producing a series of videos where we go into more detail about the background of isometrics, some of the fundamental movements, and that means that you can sort of pick it up at whatever bite-sized bit you want.
Yeah.
And we'd like to as well just go back when earlier talking about Hannah's interest in dealing with patients who have problems that could be avoided by alteration in lifestyle. There are people, obviously, genetics play roles, psychology. I mean, it's like there are often some very complex issues that drive people not to do the right thing. But the one thing that certainly is true, forming a habit, getting motivated so that you form good habits, I think is really the esprit de corps of what we're talking about, because we want to try and encourage you to realise that even if you just do a little and then you have a bad day, so you've had a bad day, go back and have another good day. One thing that studying jiu-jitsu for so long has taught me is that you're going to have good and bad days. Some days can be very bad and some days can be very good.
Yes.
And it doesn't matter who you are, I think everyone you talk to who's done sport will just reflect exactly how it is in life, that we all have ups and downs.
Yes.
And the key thing is just to keep going, not to stop, not to lose momentum.
Yeah.
Now I'd like to ask Hannah some specific questions. First, could you outline some of the isometrics that may not be recognised by people, but that you do every day? I'm thinking of baby and Sorry's out there, your husband looking after him. Over to you. One or two of the things you were talking to me about the other day where you were surprised how much isometrics is going on.
Absolutely. So you notice it again when you've been through something like a pregnancy and given birth, and I had a cesarean, so you do lose quite a lot of your mobility over that time. I've lost quite a lot of muscle as well, so I feel it now in those key places. So pushing a buggy pushing the buggy uphill particularly, I find that by the time I've done that for an hour, I'm really feeling sort of in my core and my lower back actually, where I'm exerting a lot of pressure where I don't have the muscle at the moment. So if you think about it, gripping something like the handle of a buggy, that's isometric, so you're engaging your forearm. Perhaps to explain what isometrics is slightly, just to help with
Please
that.
do, yes.
So if we use the example of a bicep curl, we commonly know that it's this movement and this movement. We've talked about concentric, so that's the concentric movement, and that's the idea of generating force, so engaging the muscle while you shorten the muscle. So the bicep itself is shortened in that movement, and then it's elongated in that movement. So again, you're creating strength, but through resistance against a muscle that's being lengthened. So shortened and lengthened and creating strength by recruiting muscle fibres. What we forget though is that very often within that movement there's a moment at the top and at the bottom of the movement that as a personal trainer you encourage people to hold. So rather than allow the weight to go and allow your arm to go at the sort of extreme ends of the movement, you're saying keep the tension on. And that moment is the isometric moment where actually we see very, very clearly that you're recruiting a huge amount more muscle fibre without changing the length of the muscle, and that's the difference. So you can see examples of how you do that in everyday life. You don't have to be pumping weights or necessarily jumping up and down to engage a huge amount of muscle, which from the perspective of somebody who's just had a baby, is really good for losing weight, but also really good for building strength back up, which is what I really want to achieve, to be able to do the things I like running, which requires a lot of core strength if you're going to run distance, and leg strength if you're going to run distance, and of course the jiu-jitsu. And also just to start enjoying looking after my baby again, lifting a baby and carrying that around all day is quite demanding. So things like pushing the pram, things like carrying shopping. So that's, you would have all experienced is that burn you get from holding shopping bags in both arms, walking up a hill. You're not moving them, you're keeping your muscles completely at the same length while you do that, and that is very good isometric exercise. And then things like even, when you're holding a position like this, doing some cleaning, doing some hoovering, all of these things are engaging the core area, if you think about it, to hold an isometric pose. So in day-to-day life, you can implement this once you're aware of it, and start to get a bit of a workout, just doing your day-to-day things.
Mowing the lawn.
Mowing the lawn,
yes.
For example.
Well, the thing that's exciting by what Hannah's saying is when we first started discussing isometrics, which we use within ACMMT, because people have long known that if you do some concentric work, shortening the muscle as part of a warm-up, that if you're then doing lengthening movements at speed, there's an element of protection given because the muscle has been better prepared. But what people perhaps weren't so aware of is that same protection can arguably be afforded to a degree and in some more specific focus ways by using isometrics. I've long used, I remember before I fought in the European Jiu-Jitsu Championships in 2016, using a towel to warm my neck up, and people say, well, don't put pressure on your neck, but actually if you're going to have somebody swinging off your head full force in about 5 minutes time, doing a warm-up where you slowly activate, that is slowly build up and prepare the body and the musculature and the neuromuscular system for what you're going to do, it's so much safer. And I think in the home, particularly say after a period of inactivity, having had a baby, being aware that there are these movements building up, even hoovering with the music and enjoying it, maybe people laugh, but we've all done it, and actually there are isometrics, eccentric and concentric movements all taking place within that collage, yes.
Just nice easy ways of incorporating it.
Now we're going to move on and produce more specific focus videos on topics, often responding to your comments and specific interests. But we'd like just to summarise this. Isometrics is vital because so many things involve correct posture, particularly of the spine. Isometrics is so useful because it can be part of a properly balanced warm-up where you activate. You don't just raise body temperature. Running around a field when you're going to get smashed or hit or thrown around may not be the best course of action, yet for many years people said, oh, hop on the bike for 2 minutes, oh, you're warm now, we'll begin. Well, no, the nervous system arguably hasn't had the neurons firing that are going to be used in the activity, if it's wrestling or rugby or jiu-jitsu. And this was the point that I introduced way back, when we first thought of this idea of neural pathways back in 1981. But it's taken some time to bring it together, and as I said, in the early 2000s we started work on the ACMNT system. Anyone who's interested in this, we are going to in the future produce some videos and make those available for you. But the takeaway message today, I think, is that isometrics can be done using equipment, using just your own body to force against it, so the opposing forces actually provide you with the resistance that allows that moment to be created. There's force taking place, tension within the muscle, and tension is really important because post-baby everyone wants to get their figure back. Muscle tone is really all about a low level of tension or a good level of tension within the musculature, so that you don't, as it were, have a flaccid muscle. And so there's an aesthetic side, isn't there, that we can point out that you may want to incorporate and use as part of your training system. Is there anything on that you think you can add, or do you think we've covered most of the main points today that you wanted to introduce?
I think that's it, and I think we just want to make sure that this is usable for different people at different stages of their lives. Obviously with my sort of own experience now as a mum, I hope that that can appeal to women of my age and, you know, with babies and busy lives, as much as to older generations of people who see that there's some value in this for building resilience. And then of course with Paul's expertise, there's the training side for people doing serious contact sports at a high level, or at any level, but you know, even at a high level.
And may I say, even people doing not obvious contact sports, or sports where there is isometrics taking place. Golf, the golf swing, when you transfer your weight across as you're making the strike, as you're transmitting that wonderful, you know, rotational movement, it's still coming through the core, and there are still isometric elements even in that.
Yes.
And so I think on that positive note, we'll for the moment say that over and out from us, but do look out for our forthcoming videos. Thank you very much.
Thank you.